to IoT Week at CES. I'm Keith Kreisher, Executive Director of the IoT MTEM Council, and this is our Newsdesk Live video program. With 25,000 product makers, designers, OEMs, enterprise users, and apps developers as members, the IMC is the largest professional organization dedicated to the global IoT sector. Our mission is to accelerate the adoption of IoT technology for the public good. And we look at this session with my good friend Ajay Joseph from iBASIS as exactly in keeping with that mission. And with that, I introduce my friend Ajay. Please, Ajay, to start off with, why don't you talk to us a little bit about iBASIS's role in the IoT ecosystem, and then perhaps shifting gears to your role at the company.
Thanks, Keith. So at iBASIS is one of the largest international carriers in the world. One of the things that iBASIS does is we provide cellular connectivity. There's different kinds of connectivity for IoT. Our focus is on the cellular side of the house. One of the reasons for that is this is one of the biggest growth areas in the IoT industry. And so that's the focus. My role at iBASIS is I head the IoT business unit as well as I'm the CTO of the company.
Right. So let's get down to brass tacks, so to speak. What components are needed in high-performing carrier networks? Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Okay. So that question, you have to look at it from a point of view of who is the customer that actually wants to buy that particular service. So if you're talking about a customer that wants, single connectivity from a single operator, doesn't care about coverage, go after the likes of buying a service from AT&T or Verizon individually. So the elements that we kind of provide and focus on is, the first is what we call network independence. So what does that mean? If you want to buy connectivity from us, you could be covered across multiple carriers with the same SIM card. So what that takes in terms of making that solution happen is we use something called an EUICC, which is an embedded SIM card. And that in turn is connected to a remote SIM provisioning system. And on that remote SIM provisioning system, we have what are called credentials or profiles from different operators from across the world to localize the SIM card. And then on top of that, we also have the entire core network infrastructure that goes into trying to get the network infrastructure as close to the device as possible to get a really good user experience for that particular IoT device.
Great stuff. Can you give us some examples of how those components are being put together, how they're being used?
Absolutely. So if you look at use cases, there could be EV chargers, there could be connected cars, they could be wearables, and specifically this is a consumer show. We cover all of that. And so the use case is basically, I'm a manufacturer, I manufacture a wearable that needs to be shipped across 50 different countries, and that particular wearable is going to be localized in that particular country, which means I need a domestic profile in that particular country. So our systems in the cloud recognize the location of that particular device, and we have information in terms of how to geofence that particular device so as to download the appropriate mobile operator's credentials onto the SIM card to localize that. Once it's localized, the data is then fed to the closest gateways that are as close to the device as possible so as to enhance the user experience. And all of this is happening under the hood so as to make this experience seamless for the user.
Interesting stuff. Remote SIM provisioning with eSIM is a relatively recent development. Is this technology available today? And where are we at? Are we still waiting for standards and technology? Where are we at when it comes to the eSIM?
So the first version of the remote SIM provisioning system was a version that was built for the car industry. Specifically, it's the M2M spec. Came out maybe about 5 years ago, actually 7 years ago. That was followed by a consumer spec, different use cases. We are now working on, and this is in production today. So this is offered by us. This is offered by several of our competitors, several other folks as well. It's available today. There's a third version of the spec that's being worked on as we speak, which is the convergence of both the M2M version as well as the consumer version. And that is getting close to delivery by the standards organizations.
Right, right. Is there a new remote SIM provisioning specification from the GSMA?
Yes, that's the SGP32. So that's the converged spec. We are at the point of actually it getting released out. Hopefully it's going to be released sometime early this year.
When will that specification be made public? And perhaps more importantly, when will services that take advantage of that spec be available?
Yeah, so if we're talking about sometime this year for it to be made public, it has to go through a test cycle, it has to go through implementation. After that, these specs really need to be handled with use cases that have lots of volume before it starts getting adopted by the general public. So we're talking about getting mainstream usage perhaps 2025, 2026.
Right, right. You know, I'll give you an easy one. Does iBASIS plan to support the new RSPD
Yes.
specification when it's ready for deployment?
Yes, absolutely. So we're working with the vendors to make that happen. Absolutely.
Very good. Hey, we're at CES. You know, there's obviously a lot of mass IoT consumer type applications here. Talk to me about what you've seen at the show. Anything interesting?
Yes, I have actually. I've come across a couple of really interesting developments. So one is essentially on artificial intelligence as to what exactly is going on in the state of the development of that technology is the recognition of human voice and what happens there. That's something that is just has blown me off. The second thing that I came across, it's in the North Hall here, is there's this company that has this inhaler that you inhale to detect if you have COVID or not.
Right.
And it's pretty disruptive. And if you think about the connection between that and IoT and the volumes that's going to generate,
Right.
it's mind-boggling.
Right, right. Hey, we're here at CES talking to my good friend Ajay Joseph from iBASIS, a company that itself is rolling out some pretty interesting technology. Thank you, Ajay, for joining us, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith.